Game Leaders presented by Gatorade, taking a look at defenses set to be on display this week in State College. Both Ohio State and Penn State top 10 nationally in points and yards allowed per game, yet both will likely have their hands full against explosive offenses. This game helping set up Dave Revson's weekly conversation with Fox Sports lead college football game analyst Joel Klatt.
And Fox Sports lead game analyst Joel Klatt joining us now, getting set to head to Happy Valley for the huge game between Ohio State and Penn State. And Joel, I want to focus our conversation on that one. Let's start with the Penn State side of this. Look, a lot of programs have had a very hard time beating Ohio State. We know that. Penn State is among them. And for James Franklin, I think it's particularly challenging just because he does have an elite program. But getting over this Ohio State hump has been really challenging. Just the one win against the Buckeyes all time. So how important is this game? Even though we know Penn State can make the playoff without beating the Buckeyes, how important is it for James Franklin and his program to break through and get a win here?
Yeah, I think that it would signal like growth and movement forward because of what you're talking about. Plus, I think of the moves that he's made in his program, and specifically the offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki. He's there because of this game. Remember we were talking about earlier in the season, I remember before the first game, I had Penn State, West Virginia, Rev, and we were talking, and I said, would it shock people to know that Penn State was statistically the best offense in the Big Ten last year? And it's like, well, yeah, it would shock everybody. Why? Because the narrative wasn't about how they played in the aggregate. It was how they played in the specific matchup games against Ohio State and against Michigan last year and over the course of the last couple of years. That's why he made this change to Andy Kotelnicki. This game is the specific game that everybody has targeted, and lo and behold, they not only get it at home, they get it with Ohio State having lost a game and with Ohio State being weakened on the offensive line. And there's some major question marks surrounding the Buckeyes up front because of that Josh Simmons injury. So you can make a strong argument that there is no better time than now for Penn State to actually get this win over Ohio State than this weekend.
Well, I want to get into that offensive line then. You were talking about it, and you had Ohio State last week against Nebraska, and obviously they are really banged up, particularly on the left side of that line. What can they do, Joel, to make up for that? Like, can you scheme around that?
Well, I think that you can. Obviously, now they're going to have a whole week, and they tried one fix with Zen Michalski at left tackle. He got hurt and was largely ineffective, and so I think that they'll go in a different direction. Now, they did have Austin Sareveld play early in the season. Remember when Donovan Jackson was down for the first couple of games? Austin Sareveld played left guard, and so he's got experience at left guard. They tried Luke Montgomery in there last week. We'll see what that film looks like, but I anticipate that Donovan Jackson's going to bump out and play an unnatural position at tackle, and Sareveld will go in there at guard, or Luke Montgomery, or maybe any combination of that and others. That puts them in a precarious spot because now Donovan Jackson will be the left tackle in what is widely considered one of the toughest environments to play offensive line in college football against a team that over the course of the last 3 seasons in college football has sacked the quarterback more than anybody else. So that is a very difficult thing to do. So offensively, what do you have to do? Rev, you have to have success on first down. Have to. Now, that can come in creative ways. Do you use the rush against them and try to throw screens? Do you try to use the trap game and the gap game in the run-oriented game plan in order to try to get free yards on first down? But the more times that Ohio State can get positive yards on first down, create shorter yard situations for second and third down, the better. And the more times that they're behind the chains, now we're going to see them really struggle because it's a patchwork offensive line, and that defensive front will end up getting after it. So that's really where my entire focus is going to be is on the first down game plan and how Chip Kelly creatively protects his offensive line and tries to gain positive yards to stay out of those obvious situations.
More broadly, off that game last week, I get the offensive line issues, but were you surprised that Ohio State came out and played the way that they did? They were, first of all, coming off a bye week, so you have time to retool. They were coming off a loss to Oregon, and I don't want to overstate the loss to Oregon. They lost by 1 point to the team that's the number one team in the country on the road. So I'm not saying that losing to Oregon, there's clearly no shame in that. But it just felt like this was a chance to kind of reestablish themselves. And I feel like we came out of that game with more questions than answers.
No, I agree with that. And I even said that at the end. I think that there were some answers on the defensive side. We understand now how they maybe want to attack and how the identity of the defense is going to change moving forward. I think they're going to try to be more aggressive. They pressured a significant amount as opposed to what they had done previous in that game against Nebraska. That's on the defensive side. And now offensively, there was just no rhythm. And I felt like you look up and they got less than 50 snaps, Rev. Do you know that? Like that's no rhythm whatsoever. They were 1 of 10 on third down. They could not stay on the field. And at times, because they were trying so desperately to establish the run, I feel like they forgot that they have probably the best weapon in college football on the outside in Jeremiah Smith and among others with a guy like Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate. They threw the ball 20 or more yards down the field twice, both of them for touchdowns, and never came back to it in the second half. Jeremiah Smith had 4 total targets on the day in a 4-point game against Nebraska. That can't happen. The offensive game plan will look different this week, and those guys will get targeted, I think, often. You look at even the Oregon game, Smith had 10 targets. Look at last 2 years against Penn State. It was a Marvin Harrison show in Happy Valley 2 years ago and Columbus last year. Ohio State will go out there and put the ball in the hands of their best playmakers. So it's going to be an Emeka game. It's going to be a Jeremiah Smith game. It'll be a Junkins and Henderson game. Those 4 guys are going to be the ones touching the football.
And onus on Will Howard to get them the ball, obviously. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the quarterback situations before I let you go. Will Howard has made it clear he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder going back to Pennsylvania. Penn State didn't recruit him. And then you have this uncertainty at quarterback for the Nittany Lions. So how does the quarterback situation play into this game on both sides?
I mean, it's huge. I mean, in matchup games, it matters how your quarterback plays. Look at Dylan Gabriel and the plays that he made in a 1-point win, right? I think the same could be said in a lot of these top 5 matchups. The way that Milroe played against Georgia early in the season, the way that Beck played in the second half and at least didn't make the mistakes that Quinn Ewers made in the Georgia-Texas game. So this game is largely going to come down to quarterback play. And for Penn State, they got to figure out who they're going to go with. Now, I agree with their assessment of don't give up any information right now. Force Ohio State to have to prepare for both Drew Aller and Bo Pribula, and specifically because those are 2 vastly different game plans that you'd be trying to prepare for. If you're going to prepare for Pribula, it's more of like an option style defensive game plan where you know you're going to have to be disciplined. You know that you're going to have to defend the zone read and the RPO and the quarterback run, and it becomes very difficult with the amount of sets and structures that Andy Kotelnicki gives. So if I'm Ohio State, I'm going to prepare for Bo Pribula and then try to react if Drew Aller walks out there. But rest assured, Penn State will not win without quality quarterback play, and the same can be said for Ohio State. And this whole chip on the shoulder for Will Howard, I get it, man. I get it. I grew up in the Denver area. I wanted desperately to play for Sonny Lubick at Colorado State. They didn't recruit me, so when I ended up walking on at Colorado, that was the game that I had circled. Trust me, Rev, and I wanted to beat them badly.
That was a different era, huh? When one aspired to play for Colorado State rather than Colorado. I'd say it worked out for you,
Well, I mean,
Joel.
I just didn't think I could play at Colorado. So when I walked on, man, that was all like gravy. You know, it's interesting in that regard.
Well, Gary Barnett is glad you walked on. Joel, we are glad you walked onto the set to talk to us here today. Really appreciate it. As always, have a great call with Gus and Jetty.
Of course, man. Can't wait. It'll be fun.